It happened so fast that I didn't know I was dead. Seemed very seamless, very flawless. I was just out of my body. And I walked up the stairs. It was like the sky opened up and I could see the vastness of the universe. I saw the stars and the planets and different colors.
Hello, Sharon. Could you tell us about your near death experience?
I was sitting on the back steps of my house talking on a cordless phone, and it started to rain. And I heard this like thunder that sounded like it was in the distance, but then it was like I heard a loud crack, and the lightning bolt had come out of the sky and it hit my right arm, and it went through me, left char marks on the concrete steps where I was sitting, and then it like traveled under the house and hit. There was a transformer in front of the house, and so it hit that. Um, when it hit me, I felt this like burning, searing. It was an agonizing pain, and it was in my arm, and it started going across my chest, and then at that point, I just came right up out of my body. It was just like peeling a banana, it just popped right up. Um, I saw myself laying there at one point, but I didn't think anything about it. There was nothing, no connection in my brain that was me laying there. Um, I didn't know. It happened so fast that I didn't know I was dead. Seemed very seamless, very flawless. I was just out of my body. And I walked up the stairs and into my kitchen. And I stood in my kitchen and I was looking all around. And it was my kitchen, but the curtains on the window was not mine. And everything had this burnt gold look to it. I was confused as to why, everything looked so odd. And then I walked into my dining room and I looked at the furniture and none of it was mine. And I couldn't figure it out. I walked into the living room and I heard what sounded like an old time radio show playing, like something back in the Waltons. And I couldn't figure out where that sound was coming from. We didn't have a radio. I couldn't figure it out, and I didn't know where everybody was. I didn't know whose furniture all that was, or where I was. It was my house. I knew how to get around in it. I just didn't know what all that stuff was that was in there. And just about the time that I started to panic, really, really panic, there was a huge, formless, loving presence that appeared. And it was like I was just wrapped in this huge presence arms, that love was so huge and so it just filled every fiber of my being. And I wasn't afraid anymore. And I felt no pain, no worry, nothing. It was just, I felt that such joy in that love that I was experiencing. And then um, we started, we did not go up, we didn't go down, we went sideways. And we moved at a very great speed through these beautiful pink and gold clouds. They were so beautiful. It was like, I don't know, pink cotton candy with liquid gold running through them. They were just beautiful. And we moved really quickly. And when we got to the end of the pink and gold clouds, there was a beautiful garden. So we were just at the entrance of this beautiful garden. Two two young men stepped forward right there at the beginning. And at first I thought they were angels because they had physical bodies and they were just glowing. And they had long, curly, blonde hair that was a darker blonde with my color running through it. And as soon as they smiled at me, it was like, oh my gosh, I know who you are. Yeah, they were angels, but not angels, not typical, not your real angel. They were my two brothers who had died when they were babies. And it was like, it was like a jolt of recognition. I knew, even though I hadn't met them in this lifetime, I knew who they were there. They were actually the ones that had tell me that I died, because I didn't know what was happening. It was like we had a wonderful family reunion when we met each other, and they looked exactly like my dad when my dad was a young man. So it was a very beautiful family gathering that we had, and they were showing me around the garden, and that's when they told me that I had died. And I thought, well, if this is dying, I can do this. This is not bad. I can do this, because there were so many beautiful colors, flowers everywhere. Uh, just there was a stream, and the stream had uh, looked like diamonds in it, and it was so beautiful. There were colors I couldn't even tell you what the colors were. They were so vibrant. My senses were very, very heightened. It was like I could see all the way around without turning my head. And I could see minute details at very far distance. So I'm in awe of all this beauty. And I heard music, and it was what I call big music. It was just like you take the biggest orchestras that there are, and you put them all together, into one great big orchestra. And it was like, the colors had a vibration, the leaves on the trees had a different vibration, the grass had another vibration. I heard birds, so there was another vibration from their music, and the water and the rocks and everything had its own vibrational sound. And when you put all that together, you have this magnificent orchestra. And that's what I was hearing, this music that was so beautiful. It was everything, and everyone was singing praises to God. And it was just absolutely breathtaking. Um, they showed me there in the distance, there was what I call the glorious city. And there was a big wall that surrounded the city. So I knew that that was some kind of barrier. You get to that point, and once you get past that point, you don't come back. So I knew that it was something similar to that. um I never got that close, although I did see some of the buildings on the outskirts of the city. I did see in the city there was um a marble building, a round marble building that had a golden dome, and it was huge. It was spectacular. It was gorgeous, and I could see the archways and the columns, and it's everything was made out of this white marble, alabaster, and there were very intricate designs carved into the archways and into the columns, and I was able to see that. um, Now, on some of the buildings on the outskirts, I could see there was what I called a healing hospital. It was like a spiritual hospital, and behind the building were these two pools, and they were rectangular shaped. They were long and square, or not square, but rectangular, and it it was like a courtyard. There were, plants and flowers, roses and things like that. But the water seemed alive. It wasn't like living water. It was like a moving water. And then there was a place where babies and children go, and they are loved and cared for by mentors and teachers, and great grandmas and great great grandmas, and you know, the children were all playing, and they were all different sizes and ages, and um, it was like Toys R Us on steroids. You know, they had all these toys. It was amazing, and they were having so much fun. But everywhere I went, I saw people, and everyone had a what looked like a physical body. And I realized that everyone was around the same age, late 20s, early 30s, like my brothers were. And when they told me that I had died, I looked down the front of me to see if had a body like everybody else did. And I did have a body. I could see my hair going down the front of me. I could see my clothes. I could see my legs and my feet. And I could feel the grass, the cool grass on my feet. And it was, like I said before, if this is death, I can do this. You know, I was still me. I looked like me, only a better version of me. And I was glowy, just like everybody else was. I still had my identity. I was still who I am now. I did notice that I did, you know, one of the big things I noticed that you can't take anything with you. The only thing you take with you is your memories, your identity, who you are, your, you know, the love that you had for the people in your life and that kind of thing. But I've had people ask me before, why didn't you take your cell phone? Well, you can't take anything with you when you go. And I didn't have a cell phone anyway. So my brothers were showing me around. There was this one room where there was, it looked like they were having a party. I didn't know who the party was for, but we were kind of standing in the doorway, and I could see the decorations in the room and how magnificent the room looked. Um, um, Deep mahogany, beautiful mahogany walls, a marble floor. There was a pink plush carpet on the floor. There were chandeliers bigger than my house hanging, just sparkling. And there were people everywhere. And the women were dressed in these beautiful gowns, and they had jewelry that matched the dresses. There were flowers that matched the colors of all the dresses and things like that. Oh, it's like you would see at a wedding. Um, there was a man over in the corner. He was playing this piano, a huge piano. There was a candelabra on the piano and a crystal vase with roses spilling out of the vase and onto the piano. People were dancing. Some people were singing. Some people were talking. Some people were eating. And there was food. On the other side of the room, I saw tables that had this beautiful white linen and silver trays with every kind of food you could imagine, finger foods, you know, for people to eat at parties. And I, it was like being infused with a, you know, like an IV bottle of divine wisdom and knowledge. And I got that when I first got there to the garden. And it was like I'm carrying around this IV and I'm getting all this knowledge and all this wisdom. And so you don't eat food. I mean, you have the body that I had was called what I call a light body. I don't know what other way to put it. I felt light. I didn't feel gravity pulling me down. I didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel dense like our bodies do here. And yet I still had a body. And I realized that no, you don't eat in heaven because you need to sustain your life. And there's no killing of animals in heaven or whatever. There's none of that. It's just, you think it, God thinks it, and there it is. It's, it's strictly for enjoyment, and it's not to sustain your life. Um, so I saw that. Um, There was a time when at a point when I had what it was a life review, and at that point there was a whole bunch of people that came over, and they were coming over for love. and support. And they were all dressed in different clothing from different time periods. I knew who they were, but I didn't know where I knew them from. I couldn't. I kept thinking, where I know these people, but I don't know where I know them. But anyway, so some of the women were in dresses and fancy, beautiful dresses. Some of the men were in fancy suits. And then there were some people that were just dressed like you and I, the way we dress today, or lounge clothes, or whatever they felt comfortable in, I guess. But they were surrounding me. My two brothers were still with me. So I had one on either side, and that loving presence was behind me. And it was just pouring that beautiful love into me. And there was it appeared to me like an old fashioned movie, a black and white movie on an old fashioned reel. And I'm watching my life from the time I was a baby until that day when I died. And it was really fast. I felt no judgment. I felt no condemnation. It was like I watched this with no thought whatsoever. It was just for this happened and that's it. It's over. It was over really quick. And I thought, wow, my life must have been boring because it was over so fast. But what was missing is that I'd always been raised to condemn myself. And I learned that we're the ones who judge ourselves when we're standing in front of the supreme being that was behind me. And he wasn't judging me, and I didn't judge me, so it was over. Um, then I heard a male voice say, what you put out into the universe will come back to you. And at that point in my life, I had never heard words like that. I didn't know anything about anything, you know, anything spiritual, I guess. Although was a very spiritual child, I wasn't necessarily religious, just very spiritual. But I did not hear those. I had never heard that. And so the lesson that I learned is that if you put out hatred, you're going to get hatred back. If you put out love, you get love back. It's that kind of thing. There was again, that spiritual IV bottle of knowledge where it was explained to me what those words meant, and it was like a boomerang, and that if we put these things out, good or bad or whatever, it goes out into the universe, spins, gains momentum, and comes back. And I thought, wow, I don't want to get hit in the head with a boomerang, so I'm going to be good, and try to um, be more cognizant of how I respond to people. So then we were walking around further in the garden, and I'm seeing all these things, and just I'm wowed, totally wowed by all of it. It was such a beautiful moment. But Jesus appeared, and he was standing there. He comes walking out of a grove of trees over in the corner by close to where the city is, and he comes over, and when he walks over to me, my brothers disappear. I don't know where they went. They left. And he was so beautiful. And he told me that he loved me, not to be afraid, and that he'd be with me. Well, that was my first clue that I was coming back, but it went right over my head. I didn't I didn't realize that, you know, I'd never been that deep into an experience like this. So I didn't know what was going on, really. Um, so he walked me over to a wooded glen. Um, there were pine cones laying on the ground, little blue flowers that had popped up, but you could see there was a log laying there, and I sat down on the log, and there were sunlight was coming through the tall pine trees and the oak trees. And so I'm sitting there, and there's a man sitting on the other end of the log, and I knew that man was God. He looked completely different than Jesus did, but yet they had similar personalities, um, similar feeling. you know. And so God looked at me and he said to me, "What would you do if it was just me and you?" And I didn't understand what he meant. That concept did not register in my brain. What what are you talking about? Um, so he said it again. Uh, what would you do if it was just me and you? You know, if there was no parents, no kids, no friends, nobody, just me and you. And I still didn't get it. So he stood up and he said, "Come with me." And we walked further into the garden, into a clearing. And he kind of waved his hand. And when he did, it was like the sky opened up and I could see the vastness of the universe. I saw the stars and the planets and different colors. And um, I thought, wow, that's all really big, but there's no trees, no people, no cars, no houses. Oh, I looked over at him and I said, "If it's all of that and just me and you would be tired of me after the first 10 minutes with all my questions and chatter, and then you wouldn't like me very much anymore." So I told him, "No, that was more than I could take, I guess." But he laughed. He threw his head back and he laughed. And when he laughed, his eyes sparkled. And he had a really good personality, you know. And so we went back and we sat on the log and he asked me the question again. And then I didn't know how to, I don't know where these words came from. I don't know. I never read anything. I didn't understand anything about what I was saying, but the words came into my mind that God, you are everywhere, you are nowhere, and you are in me. To all of those words, and I didn't know. He said, "Yes, that's right." And and so I'm looking at this tree, and I'm looking at the detail of the bark of this very ancient oak tree that was right there. And I noticed the roots in the ground, the detail of the bark, the leaves, and how the roots pull the nutrients out of the ground. And those go up into through the trunk of the tree and into the leaves, and the leaves clean the air, and we breathe the air. And so everything is connected and interdependent upon everything else. That was big for me and my thinking that, wow, you know, everything is connected and everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. And there's no there's no mistake about any of it. So then I started thinking about my parents. And well, I said about the tree, I said, "God, you made this tree, you are in this tree, so when I see this tree, I see you." He said, "Yes, that's right." Then I started thinking about my parents, and I said the same thing about my parents. You made my parents. You are in my parents. So when I see my parents, I see you. He's, yeah, that's right. And and so I started thinking about someone who had hurt me very deeply in my life, and I said, even though there are people that hurt other people, you made these people. You are in these people. And he said, "Yes, that's right." And so that's when I learned about free will, actually. Then he asked me, he said, "Well, I've got a question for you." I said, "Okay." And he said, "When you look in the mirror, what do you see?" I said, well, my first thought was I didn't know how to answer him because you don't tell the creator of everything that you see nothing when you look in the mirror. And at that point in my life, I saw nothing, just me, which was nothing because I had been so beaten down by the world. Um, People were telling me, "You're fat, you're ugly, you're stupid, you're worthless," all of these horrible things. And I was believing it. And that's when God was like, "I don't make junk. I don't make mistakes. You are important. I made you." I'm in you, that kind of thing. We had this conversation where he was telling me there was no mistake. That, I believe, was the reason why I had been hit by lightning 4 times. He was trying to get my attention because of all this abuse that I had been taking from people. And every time I was hit by lightning, it was like, I'm trying to talk to you and you're not listening. So he, turned up the volume each time until that day. And it was big enough to where I was standing in front of him and he was able to say, "You are not what the world tells you you are. You are what I tell you you are. And I made you perfectly. And in my eyes, you are perfect. Even though we live an imperfect journey, we are not perfect. But in his eyes, what he made, what he created is perfect. And that I was to stop listening to the world and listen to him.
How exactly did this experience impact your belief systems? Did you become more spiritual, more religious?
Well, I I wouldn't say religious actually, although I have always had a very deep love for Jesus, but I wouldn't say that I was like overly religious. I was more spiritual. And after I had my that experience, I came back on what I called the pink bubble. And that was, I didn't know what else to call it. I had no words. I didn't even know NDE, that word. No, I knew nothing about any of this stuff. So I didn't have words to explain to people what I experienced. And they all thought I was crazy. And I was like, no, I'm not. Um, but my love for the creator, God, source, whatever people call it, and that deepened. I had the deep oneness still. It was like I still had a foot in heaven and a foot here. I was like literally floating, and everything I looked at had this pink glow, and it was like I was uh, literally reborn again, not the reborn that some people talk about, but it was like I felt like a baby again, and I was just in awe of the beautiful flowers and the birds, and I had birds and animals flocking to my yard. And people were saying when I would walk into a store, they would say, "You just glow," But I loved everything and everyone, and that lasted for about 6 months until um, the cruelty of the world caught. I was just blown away by I couldn't believe that what the world is like versus what it was, like when I was in that pink bubble that did burst eventually, but it was about 6 months. Um, and then coming back to reality, it was like, wow, oh my goodness. It was a shock. Um, but I honor and respect all religions and traditions, whatever. And I believe that, and God never asked me what my religion was. He didn't ask me what church I went to or how many cars I had or how big of a house I had or anything like that. He didn't care about that. But but it did matter what kind of a relationship I had with him and what kind of a relationship I had with the people he put in my life. And that's what's important. And so I am just a very open-minded um, person, and I honor and respect everybody. I don't ever want to hurt anyone ever.
What is the most important lesson you learned?
Heaven is real and God is real. However, whatever name you give him, you know, and that God is really spirit. He's not male, he's not female, he's has no gender, he has no shape or form unless He himself decides he wants to take a form, and him being the creator of everything that has ever existed, he can do anything he wants to, and he never has to do the same thing twice. He can do anything. And he took on a form for me that I could understand. And so I have had a lot of people say, the Bible says you can't see God's face or you'll die. And well, I was already dead, for one. And two, if God wants me to see his face or whatever face he chooses, I can see his face. And I did not burn up. But God is love. That source, that the creator of everything is pure love. He loves us all. That we're all equal. We might be on different paths, at different levels of our path and our spiritual journey, but he loves us and he's with us always. And if that love is so deep that if you stop and think that he thinks about each and every one of us individually every moment of every day, and if he stopped thinking about us for 1 second, we would just poof, cease to be, like we would not be here. It's it it was mind blowing to me when I realized that alone versus everything else that I was taught. But I learned that I don't have to listen to what the world says, because we are in the world, but we are not of this world. This is not our home. This is this is like a virtual reality game, and we're supposed to learn things here. Um, but what's real is what's on the other side. And we do have loved ones over there. I saw my loved ones over there. I saw children. I saw, there were so many people, but it was such a big place. But yet, I don't know. It's just such a beautiful experience, and it did change me.
Mhm.
Um, I learned to look at beauty in the little things. If I love heart-shaped rocks and heart-shaped rose petals and things like that. And I don't need any huge miracle to know that all of heaven is real, and uh, we can, based on another experience I had, we can make our own heaven right here or not. And we have that free will to choose.
Sharon, thank you very much. How can people find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook. Um, I also have a WordPress, but it's the same as my title as my book, A Song in the Wind. Um, but and I'm open to talking with anybody. They can email me